channel. I'm Deanna and you're watching Orchid. So if you hadn't guessed it already, we are going to do an update on my fowl grow space, and this is an area you probably haven't seen for quite some months now. If you're new to my channel, I did take a little break from YouTube for a few months, and I'll put a link up now to my first video when I returned from that break, which is an update on my balcony grow space. But I did have a few months towards the end of last year where I had some life stuff going on, and unfortunately my orchids got a little bit neglected during this period, and I must say, shamefully, my fowls probably bore the brunt of that neglect. Sometimes they wouldn't get watered for like weeks at a time, and you know, I just walk past and pour some of my drink bottle water into them. But I must say, my Phalaenopsis orchids are the most resilient bunch of orchids, and I'm not sure if that was because they were healthy and they had a lot of reserves, but the complex hybrid phals for me have always been the most forgiving of neglect. And throughout that period where I wasn't really looking after these orchids very well, I didn't lose a single Phalaenopsis orchid, which, I mean, is a real testament to these guys. So in my last orchid haul, I bought mostly Phalaenopsis orchids from Robertson Orchids, and I actually think that's because these complex hybrid phals did so well for me over this little period of neglect. Like, for me, they are one of the easiest groups of orchids to grow, and so I think they were just a good choice of orchids to get a few of, to get, you know, maybe your confidence back after a little bit of a bad run. So as you can see now, these guys have lots of active root tips and leaves and things like that. But if you saw these guys in December, you would have seen a lot more yellow through the grow space. Luckily, they were all pretty healthy, and so what happens is they start drawing on their reserves. So they start using up their older leaves, resorbing their old flower spikes and things. So if you do start seeing those signs, it usually means they're dehydrated, or their root systems aren't doing very well, or that you're not giving them enough nutrients to sustain their own growth. So you can see signs of some yellowing leaves here and there. Still, this orchid started yellowing that leaf in like January. As soon as you start watering and fertilizing these orchids again, that process either stops or it slows down considerably. And I think that's a good sign that the leaf loss is actually due to poor nutrition or poor hydration. That is not reversible. Once your leaves start going yellow and going a little bit limp, that's a sign that they're going to fall off. And so you'll see it in monopodial orchids. When they are stressed or not getting enough hydration or nutrients, they'll start losing older leaves. So Phalaenopsis and Vandas tend to do that. In your sympodial orchids like Cattleya, you might see older leaves dropping off, as well as the oldest pseudobulbs going a bit yellow and softening, and that's usually a sign also of nutrient reabsorption being redirected to the newer parts of the plant. So some of the yellowing leaves didn't come from the bottom, they came from the middle of the stem, and that's usually not a very good sign. You really need to inspect your plants a little bit further if that starts to happen. So you can see this Soga Euclidean actually started losing some leaves from the middle there, and I found mealybugs in there. So pests like mealybugs certainly like your plants when they're dehydrated and a little bit weak, and that's when they usually attack. Also, you know, the act of just inspecting your plants properly every time you water usually prevents any infestations like that from taking hold. But yeah, unfortunately these little guys didn't get that, so there were some mealybugs here and there, but nothing so severe as to take down the whole plant. So let's have a look at these orchids one by one, just because I rarely do this. These two orchids are sitting on my piano because that one needs repotting, but both of them just recently got brought in from my living room area, which is where I usually display some of my flowering orchids. But to be honest, that area that I keep them, it gets a lot of foot traffic, but it's not the best area for keeping houseplants because the airflow is not good, the light's not great, and it's always air conditioned because in summer it's hot, so we have the air condition in our living room and living areas obviously, so they don't tend to grow as well in that area, so it'll be happier coming back in here. But you can see it's still got some nice roots in there. So this one is a white fowl that I got as a present when I was unwell late last year, so it needs repotting. It's in sphagnum. Honestly, I have so many white fowls, and I bought just one of them. I have about 4 others that people have given me either as rescues or as presents, which is really lovely. I might get them to respike in autumn and give them away to friends. You can see a lot of these guys still have their old flower spikes, but I think I'm going to cut them off today. So I've always been a little bit torn about whether to keep old spikes or not, but I did release a video a few months ago which compared some of my flowers from secondary spikes and second flushes of blooms compared to flowers that came off from new fresh spikes, and I definitely believe there was a difference in the quality of the blooms. The ones that came off the secondary spikes didn't last as long. I didn't get as many, so I think the quality of the blooms is better on fresh spikes. And the other thing that I've considered now is, so Miss Orchid Girl put out a pretty good video on secondary spikes and why she doesn't keep them, but she did point out that all the structures on the orchid do consume energy to maintain as well, and so having a green spike does consume a little bit of energy. But I think that after this video I am going to cut off some of these orchid spikes and maybe I'll take you along as well. So up here we've got a no ID Phalaenopsis that I've called Buttercup, but if you might remember her, I actually repotted her in December, and can you see all those amazing roots that have grown since December? And you might be able to see that water dripping. It got watered yesterday, and I do leave a tiny little reservoir down the bottom so I don't have to water as frequently in summer because the days are still 30+ degrees Celsius. You can see it just grows roots straight into that water. It does not mind at all. This one is Val Allura Paradise, and it's got a new spike actually. It's blooming quite late in the season and I'm not too sure why, but anyway, it's growing this spike, also growing this leaf. Maybe it was just waiting for better conditions to bring out a spike. And here is Val Profile Fragrance, and this is an old spike. This is the first blooming for it, so it wasn't very impressive, but I will probably chop that off along with the rest of the old spikes. So this one down here is another Val that I repotted along with the other no ID when I did the mass Paphiopedilum repotting. So after 2.5 months you can see that those roots are doing really well. And so this one they both came out of straight sphagnum into this mix. I know this looks really weird. Does anyone else actually do this? I soak my aerial roots with cotton pads, and I do this on my Vandas as well, just to soften them so I can redirect them. So you can see this one down here, I've redirected to go into the pot, and as it softens you can sort of slowly and gently redirect these roots so it grows into the pot. I do love aerial roots. I love the look of them. They look really wild and beautiful, but they are just a pain. Honestly, they get knocked about and then they'll eventually break and bruise and dry off. Like over here, you know, these are all just desiccated aerial roots. So I would prefer them growing into the pot, and especially there's some plants, for example this one, which, you know, are really heavily leaning to the side, and I would much prefer some of these roots to go down into the medium, so at least I know it's very secure in the pot. So same with this one. This is a housewarming gift that my mum gave me a few years ago when we moved into this house. But you can see it heavily leans to one side, and I just much prefer these roots going into the media. So you can see I have actually redirected that root in, and this one as well. Yeah, after a few soaks they start getting quite pliable, and you can just gently redirect them. Very occasionally they do break, and well, if they break, they break. But I do try and take my time to sort of soften them so they'll just slowly be able to bend into the pot. That's just what I do, that's just my preference. This middle one here is Tzu Cheng Balm. I got it in the middle of last year and it's doing very well as well. You can see nice roots growing in there. This shelf was a little bit of a recovery shelf actually. So this Phalaenopsis got some mealybugs in it. I cleaned it up, it's now growing quite well, but I do think it would benefit probably from a repot because it's sitting quite high in its pot. This one here is Falbastianii. I actually do think this was featured in one of my repotting videos. So it was in a pot, it never took well, never established in the pot. So I took it out and put it in this sphagnum, and you can see that it is growing lots of nice new root tips. So I think that'll be ready for potting up soon. So you can sort of see it's in a container with no holes in it, but it is growing those nice new root tips now, so I think it's a good time to pot it into its own pot, and I think it'll do better. This is a really good method to get those root tips growing. You can see that the new leaves haven't really grown to a good potential, but I think it'll be happier in a fairly sphagnum heavy new pot. I've got another little mini No ID here, which I mainly got for its beautiful mottled leaves, but it got repot along with those other No IDs and it's doing well. And last on the shelf we have Phal equestris, and it's been in bloom for a little while actually. Look how cute these little flowers are. Love that colour and the shading and that little lip that protrudes out. So these flowers are going over now. I'm not sure if you can see, but it did have almost like a little bit of a sequential lot of blooms, almost like an epidendrum, like it just kept bringing out new flushes of blooms. But yeah, this is one flower spike I might keep because I kind of just want to see what it'll do next year. So down on this shelf, everything's in growth mode. A lot of these guys did flower over spring, and honestly, like, I just missed the opportunity to take photos, which is really sad because these guys are in bloom a really long time, but it is what it is. But they're all doing pretty well now. So this is Phal Allura Victoria's Glory. You can see roots coming out, new leaf, have a little look at its root system there. Jared, thatching the lawn. He hates me filming him. Alright, next up we've got DTPS Toccata Formosa. It did not bloom for me last year, and I'm pretty sure I know why. So it's growing lots of nice new roots now, but this was the last plant last year to come out of semi-hydro, and it had the absolute most disgusting, worst mealybug infestation I've ever seen, and I will link the video up here. If you're not creeped out easily, watch it. It is disgusting. This one is one that I've named White Memory. So this is another white Phal. My friends gave it to me a couple of years ago when my little dog Sebastian passed away, because I was very, very sad. I don't think I'll ever get rid of this little one. Had a nice little flowering this year, but yeah, just a very simple white Phal, but very dear to me for that reason. This is another little recovering one. So this was given to me by Jared a couple of years ago. It came to me in flower out of season, but it was just in the worst condition when I repotted it, and it was in several containers, like it had been uppotted several times, so the actual stem was all rotten, so it's taken a really long time to recover. Never seen it rebloom, but it's doing pretty well now, and hopefully it'll rebloom this year, maybe. Down here is Phal Allura Santa Claus. I think this is actually cold damage. Last year, I think it was by an open window and it was resting on a cold ceramic sort of thing, and it got some cold damage, but it hasn't really progressed beyond that, so I don't think it's infected or anything. This is Phal So Go Euclidean, the one white Phal I actually did purchase. You can see I lost a couple of the little leaves there, but now happily growing some new leaves. And it did flower for me. I wasn't very impressed with the flowering, but it was a first flowering, so I'll give it another go this year. You can see that it's got a nice root system. They all are doing really well in terms of root growth and everything now. So this is Phal Chin Shing Smile Kitty, and I am actually going to cut this further back because I did have one plant, I think it was the yellow housewarming plant that I showed you before, but I left a stem like this and it threw out a secondary spike instead of putting out a new flower spike, and I thought that the flowering wasn't as good as it could have been, so I'm going to cut that back today as well. This one is Phal Stewartiana. These mottled leaves are just absolutely wonderful. I love the patterning on this, and you can see a new leaf coming out there. You can check out the roots in this one as well. Doing very well. This is one of my first Phals that my grandma gave me. It's always done pretty well, and it's got a little new leaf popping out there. This is a white Phal that my work colleagues gave me to rescue. It was in a very, very sorry state when I got it. You can see it's doing quite well now. So this could have like a nice lip, it could have some patterning on it, it might not just be plain white, but once it flowers, if it is just a pure white Phal like some of my others, then I will probably just give it back to my work colleagues, which they'll probably just give back to me once it starts declining again, but never mind. This one is a No ID mini Phal with a beautiful pink lip. Down here, I'll just quickly show you. So these 3 plants came from outside only a few weeks ago, and it's probably too little too late. So this is a Bulbophyllum vaginatum. I'm not sure if you can see, but it's lost a lot of bulbs there, and that's just purely from dehydration. It shouldn't have been outside, and it was outside for too long, and it got dehydrated too many times. I really think this one needed much more moisture than I was giving it. But anyway, there it is. It is growing a new growth, if you can see that. My 2 Miltoniopsis as well, it's endured probably the worst of the summer months outside. Honestly, I commend them for still trying to hang in. I think they're pretty close to death. I don't actually think they're going to make it too much longer in my care, but for what it's worth, they have been moved inside. And this is my newest addition with my recent haul last week, Bulbophyllum meanchicora. And I think it looks pretty happy there. Unfortunately, I don't have like a little saucer big enough for it, but I'm sure we can improvise. So this last shelf, this one is a Naiad called Fuchsia Forever. It actually had quite a few mealybugs through it. You can see the root system's pretty good, but yeah, it's lost a few lower leaves. You can see it's still trying to hang on to one there, but it also had mealybugs through the flower stem, which I've cut off. And it actually had mealybugs in the crown, so it had a little leaf emerging. And I really was gently trying to get some alcohol to clean out those mealybugs, but accidentally ripped out the entire leaf. But the leaf actually extends all the way down into this middle stem. So I pulled out the whole leaf, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but it's been about just over a month now, and it's just starting to emerge with a new leaf. And you can see it probably is just still the old leaf, but you can see where it's been broken at the tip. So that's interesting. I really wasn't sure what would happen, whether it would just start with a new leaf on a new one, or the crown would just die off and it would start a keiki. But yeah, it's just continuing to grow this little leaf. This one is a Naiad as well, but it's this beautiful dark purple one. Now, let me tell you, so these roots that are growing up look terrible, but they were entirely stuck in the side of this pot. So this pot has a really rough ceramic interior, which the roots love to stick to. So I need a new pot for this, because I really had to get a butter knife and remove those roots because they were completely stuck. You can see it's doing well otherwise, but yeah, I've sort of massacred those roots a little bit. Another little Naiad, this is Tropical Punch. You can see that the last leaf didn't do very well, and it's growing a new leaf there. Just a sign of being a little bit stressed. And this one is my Stella, my beautiful big fowl. I'm going to get rid of that flower spike soon. Beautiful root system there. And last of all here is Phal Allura Vesuvius, and it's doing pretty well, growing this new leaf here, and you can see the root system on this is doing very well too. So let's chop off some of these flower spikes, shall we? I'll try and get rid of these one-handed. Let's see. So I have to apologise, Jared's whippersnipping out the front, so it's going to be a bit noisy, but let's chop off these flower spikes. Might actually leave this one because we're going to repot it, and sometimes the old flower spikes can act as a really good point to stake. But let's chop off. So go Vivian. It's not that easy holding camera in your one hand, using your left hand, your non-dominant hand. So I'm going to cut this one right there, right at the base. You can see. And last of all, beautiful Stella. Where are we going to cut? Let's cut her there. So it's the next day, and it is a gloomy, rainy day, which I absolutely love. But I thought I'd tack on this little update. After the video yesterday, I went ahead and repotted these new phals from the recent haul, and also some other much needed repottings like my Zygopetalums. But I realised that I forgot my little Phal Bastianii. Anyway, it seems to be fairly settled here in that little sphagnum, so I'll just keep it there for another month. I do have like a bit of a 2020 resolution to try and do a repotting session at least once a month. You know, I have high hopes for this year, and I will try and keep on top of my repottings. So my freshly repotted phals are going to have to fit in here somewhere, and this space is slowly filling up. I've been thinking for a while anyway that we need a little bit of a revamp in this room. I mean, I had grow lights and things up over winter, but I took them down over summer because we get a little bit of direct light. But this room stays fairly bright with this big window even in winter, but technically it's kind of autumn now, even though it's still super hot. But technically it's autumn now and the sun has moved to the other side of the house again, so I kind of want to utilize this window a bit and put up a set of shelves and maybe get a new grow light, because I just have some cheap eBay grow lights which I'm not very happy with. So I might get another Mars LED and get a shelf and hang it up just to clean up this area a little bit and make it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. But yeah, that's my plan for the next couple of months for this grow space. But as you can see, the plants are generally doing well. And just to finish off the video, I have one more little phal to show you. So this is one of my display areas. This shelf probably needs a little bit of a tidy up. That's the downside of glass shelving, but I do like to keep flowering orchids where there's a bit more foot traffic so we can see them. But this area in the living room, and I also keep some orchids down there that are in flower, but you can see it's quite gloomy here. We do get some afternoon light through that window, but on days like this particularly, it's quite gloomy. So I did want to finish the video off by showing you guys my little DTPS Belladonna in full bloom. You can see her little petals shimmering away there in the light, and I just absolutely adore that little lip and the yellow in the throat there. I hope you guys enjoyed this little update, but please give it a thumbs up if you liked it and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more orchid videos. Hope you guys have a fantastic week and happy growing until I see you next time. Bye!